Do 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 way do ba da do wow do 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 do. Hi, welcome to Ray Files. That was today's cold open. This is episode 100 and something. And yeah, let's see if any of you guys watching, any of the nobodies who are watching this, I know who you aren't. See if any of you guys know what that song is. And if you do, you should comment below and not just text me, because I don't know who you are, obviously. Anyway, yes, I promised that I would talk about Red Rising this episode. I also received a question about a topic that I think fits in rather nicely to some things that I've been thinking about. So we'll start off with Red Rising, and I'll let you know the question so you can have it stewing in your brains while I answer. The question is, what are my thoughts on audiobooks? And do I feel like I get the same sort of connection to the text as when I'm reading? And that's a good question. And before I answer, I'm going to focus up because there is a live wire chilling on the ground by a bunch of water, so I'm going to be a little careful how I walk these next steps. Okay, I should be fine. My shoes are also rubber, so as long as it doesn't splash up. Okay, I'm good. As long as I don't step in a deep puddle or whatever. Anyway, okay. So, now that you have that question stewing in your head, let's talk about Red Rising. I really liked Red Rising, but I was wrong. I said that it was the first book other than the Sanderson ones that I had read that I really enjoyed, which isn't true. I also really enjoyed the first book of The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, I believe. Well, mostly by Robert Jordan, partially by Brandon Sanderson. But I haven't read the Sanderson ones yet, and I only listened to the first Jordan one. That one also I really loved. So let's talk about Red Rising. It was tough to get into, but once I got into it, I was in it, and I feel like this is one of the failures of the fantasy genre, and I'm not really sure how it could change, really. But one of the failures of fantasy and sci-fi, which Red Rising, I mean, there's a pretty thin line between sci-fi and fantasy, and whatever. I'm not gonna get into that. So one of the failures of fantasy is that it has to do so much work to create exposition and create a world that the reader cares about. And not only that, but I feel like if you're a fantasy reader and you love fantasy and you know that you're going to want to delve into this world and figure it all out, then you can do that. And I mean, I love doing that, and I like figuring out all the little things and seeing what the author is playing with. But the problem is that, first of all, not everyone likes to do that. So a lot of people will be like, oh, the first 100 pages of this book are exposition about a world that I don't care about. Like, that sucks, which is fair. And that's it. I mean, unless you're willing to suspend your disbelief and just go along with it and accept that you're not going to understand like 70% of the content that you're reading or listening to, it's a tough ask. So I'll leave that there, and then I'll go back to Red Rising. I didn't care about Red Rising until, let's say, the tournament arc started, right? So tournament arc, it's anime lingo, like every shonen has a tournament arc, or multiple. Dragon Ball. But Red Rising is essentially just a tournament where you have a main protag. He's extremely powerful. He's slightly more powerful than all the other characters, and at least in his world, right? So in the tournament, not necessarily outside the tournament. And he has to win. That's it. And it's set with a little backdrop of he's incognito, he's undercover, which has its own little, flavors, excitements, and whatnot. But that's pretty much it. And it's really exciting. The problem with it is, in order to get the main character's motivation, you needed to sit through the first, I think, 25% of the book. Now, the book isn't long, but that's about 4 hours. I don't know how many chapters it is. 4 hours is a long time to sit with a book and not really know what's happening. You don't really, there isn't that much conflict, really, so, there's not a lot propelling the plot. It's really just figuring out who the characters are, and it is a slog, and it was for Red Rising, which is where I'll jump in with my audiobook talk. For me, I've always loved reading. Oh, dead bird on the ground. I've always loved reading. But getting into books is always the hardest part, because once I get into a book, especially a fantasy book, I'm going to love it. I'm going to finish it in probably a week. Reading it or listening to it on audiobook. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go crazy on it. Unless it's really long, like Sanderson or Robert Jordan. Is it Robert? I don't know. Or Wheel of Time, let's say. So, but I could never have enough patience to get through, well, not never, because obviously I did many times and I love fantasy, but for a lot of books that are really good and I've wanted to read them, I could never get into them because I would just get bored in the first 100 pages, which is reasonable, I think. I mean, I'm excusing myself, but I think it would, even if someone was reading a fantasy book that I wrote, I would excuse that. Because it's a lot of effort for something that you don't know if you're going to care about. But one of the things I like about audiobooks is I listen to them while I'm doing other things. For instance, while I'm walking to and from work and I have nothing else that I could be doing. I could listen to a podcast. Those don't excite me as much as audiobooks. That's just a choice. Or I could listen to music, and music gets old eventually, I don't want to listen to the same 50 songs every 2 weeks. So altogether, audiobooks is nice for that, and I also do it while I'm working. I'm lucky that I have a job that doesn't require that much brain power, so I can kind of just, listen to the audiobook and then also do my work. So another one of the really nice things about that is when I first start a book, I listen to it while I am doing tasks. And if the book's boring, then I don't really listen to it if it's on an audiobook. I'll be in and out here and there. Now I spend a lot of time thinking about fantasy writing, so And also, I like to think of myself as generally a smart guy. So I listen. So, like, with me paying, let's say, 30% attention to the first quarter of a fantasy book, I can get, I'd say, about 90% of what happens. Now, I lose a couple little details. Some things are a little confusing. It's never been a problem. And if the book is good enough, like A Wheel of Time, like Red Rising, like Mistborn, it'll hit a spot where it just gets exciting for me, and then I won't miss anything. So I think people who don't like audiobooks, I think this is a common issue, is you find that you just get distracted really easily, which is true for me as well. But I find that there is a spot along the way where it clicks, and I don't really know where that spot is exactly. I don't know where that spot is, but it happens. And like, maybe it's part of it, like you're forcing yourself and you pick up more than you think that you do, and you go, all right, yeah, I know this character, his wife dies, okay, he's getting surgery, I get it, I know what's happening, I get it, it's the same things over and over again, yep, okay, these characters are doing these things, yep, it makes sense, and then bam, what, oh, I wasn't expecting that thing to happen, now let's see what happens. And then that moment, it like locks in my attention. And while I'm walking, those are my favorite moments, because 35 minutes, you know, it's a commute, it's not terribly long. But walking, it gets, you know, boring. You see the same things every time, your legs get tired, whatever. But the moment I'm in a book and it clicks like that, my walk happens in a second. You know, like I teleport, which is awesome. I mean, that's why I do it, because I love that feeling of, well, it's a feeling like I've wasted no time. I've paid full attention to my book. I've gotten from one place to the other and nothing has lost, you know? So that's why I really like audiobooks now. Red Rising, I mean, I didn't really talk that much about it. I really liked it. The Greek and Roman names, Roman, I guess, more so, kind of annoyed me at the start, because I could tell, like, especially with a society that's as far advanced as society is in that book, it's like, you really think they're still horny about the Romans? I don't know. It seems a little silly to me, and like, I really like Roman culture, but I don't think we should model our society after it. Even though we kind of have, but we also kind of haven't, which is part of the reason why I studied Roman history, because I wanted to know where the differences were. So when I was reading the book and it was all Roman, hoorah, I'm like, really? Everything's Roman still in this future? It was just a little unbelievable, and it seemed like the author was a little too into classics when he was growing up, and maybe as he's old now. I don't know. He looked kind of young in the picture. I don't know how old he was when he wrote it. So that was my whole deal with the naming conventions. It was just like, it just let me see the author too closely, I feel like. Granted, he explains it well in the book, so it makes sense, but I don't know. Yeah, whatever. I really liked the book. It didn't really change anything for me, other than made it harder for me to get into it at the beginning. So there's that. And then I'll end right now, but a little sneak peek is the book that I'm currently on. Woof. Way worse in terms of the classics, but I'll get into that next episode. Quick editorial. If you kind of want to read a fantasy book and a bunch of people have been telling you to read it, you may or may not like it. But if you can't get into it in the first I mean, here's the editorial. If you want to read a fantasy book, expect the first quarter to be boring. And if you really don't feel like putting that much effort into a book, then maybe you don't want to. And that's okay. See you next time.